Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? All right, so everybody had a good lunch? Yes? Yes? I need a bigger yes. All right, thank you. Well, Governor Cooper said that his challenge was to speak before lunch. I would say that speaking after lunch is even more challenging, so bear with me here. So I am the executive director and co-founder of the Blue Sky Funders Forum, which is a funder affinity group that is connecting people with nature and is promoting environmental literacy. But prior to Blue Sky Funders Forum, the work that I've done for the last decade is about connecting farms to schools, and it's called the Farm to School model, which is what I'm going to talk about today as the co-founder of the National Farm to School Network and past executive director. So we've had a good lunch. I want to question and ask you how many of you thought about the rural-urban connections that happened for that lunch to happen? Anybody? Some folks. Well, I think the talk that I'm going to give today, is really about making rural and urban connections, but really looking at farm connections with schools and other institutions. And I would encourage you to think about the connections that happen when we have lunch at a restaurant, when we have lunch at or a meal at home, or when we have events like this in terms of planning. I'm not sure what the venues, this particular venue's local purchasing policy is, but I would encourage all of you to consider that every time you plan an event, every time you eat at a restaurant, every time you think about cooking something at home, to think about the local and regional connections, the rural-urban connections that can happen with supporting a local and regional economy. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So the work that I've been doing for the last decade has been really around connecting farms to schools. And the approach is called Farm to School because it has a three-pronged approach. It has a connection for farmers to get into schools to supply for the school cafeteria program. So it's actually food going into schools from rural areas, but also from urban areas because there are urban farms as well, as you know. And it's connecting kids with the source of their food, so getting kids into the garden to learn about how food is grown, to actually get their hands in the dirt and grow something. And trust me, if a child has grown broccoli in that garden, that child will eat that broccoli without any complaints and actually ask their friends to eat it too. So they're proud of it, and so they're going to eat it. And then thirdly, experiential education opportunities for children to connect with food and connect with farmers and connect with the source of food. So bringing farmers in the classroom, getting kids out to the farm, getting chefs in the classroom, all of these activities together encompass Farm to School, the model that I'm going to talk about today. And we believe that it really makes a difference in how kids are eating. It makes a difference in how farmers are accessing the school market. It's a pretty substantial multi-billion-dollar market in the United States, school meals is. And so how are local and regional farmers accessing that market? And thirdly, how are communities benefiting from it? Because Farm to School as an approach is really community-driven. And so there's partnerships happening within the community, partnerships happening between rural and urban areas, between farmers and schools and other institutions as well as value chains are being set up. And the community is benefiting as well. So we call it the triple win of Farm to School. Kids win, farmers win, communities win. So it doesn't, why wouldn't anybody do it? There are challenges, of course, and we're going to talk about that today. But my task today is really to talk to you about some models similar to Farm to School or Farm to School models that are happening all across the country so that we get some ideas for implementation in North Carolina. So I'm going to start off with a model from, or an example, I should say, from Michigan. Any Michigan folks here? Or any folks from the Midwest? I know somebody from Chicago there. Right. So excellent. Well, Michigan in 2010 started a campaign called Cultivate Michigan, which is about bringing 20% of Michigan products into Michigan institutions by 2020. They're at about 16% right now, and they have about 2 years to go. But how this campaign came about was it was a legislative agenda, so state agencies, legislators, agencies of health, education, Health and Human Services, and agriculture, of course, came together. Nonprofits came together and set up a statewide campaign with this goal of getting 20% by 2020. They're at 16%, as I said, right now in terms of institutions, bringing in about $4 million worth of product annually into schools, but other institutions as well, so colleges, hospitals, prisons, corporate cafeterias. Once the system is set up for schools, the school food system by far is the most complicated, let me tell you. It's highly regulated. The price point is really low because it's a federally regulated program and a federally reimbursed program. So if you can crack, for farmers, if you can crack the school food thing, then you can totally crack the college and the hospital and all the other things, because the price points are much higher for farmers. And so in Michigan, they've been able to get to about 14%. In addition to that, they've also been able to get state funding for providing schools with an additional 10 cents per meal. So schools that are buying from local farmers are getting an additional 10 cents per meal. And that is facilitating this agenda about getting 20% local in institutions across Michigan by 2020. So that's one thing to think about, all these different cross-sectoral organizations coming together to think about a state-level campaign, and they're certainly on their path towards 20%. So that's one example that I wanted to share with you. The other one that I want to share with you is a farmer survey and a farmer sort of study that was done in two areas, one pretty close by, the state of Georgia, and one in the Minneapolis St. Paul School District. In both cases, when farm-to-school efforts were happening, when local and regional local farmers, let's say just within the state farmers, were selling to schools, there was an economic multiplier effect that was happening, and that study was done to find that. I know there are some economists in the audience, so I'm going to share some data with you. Write it down if you want to, because I'm going to continue to share more data with you as well as we go along. So in Georgia, the economic multiplier effect was 1.48, and just because of farm-to-school efforts happening in the state. In the Minneapolis School District area, the economic multiplier effect was 1.45. So what that means is, for every dollar that is going into the school system, so schools buying, every dollar that schools are buying from local and regional farmers, an additional 45 cents or 48 cents is being circulated in the local economy, in the state's economy. So that's significant. $1, you're adding almost half of it more into the local economy. In addition to that, this study also found that there was an employment multiplier effect as well happening. When schools start buying from local and regional farmers, carrots come with carrot tops because they're buying from local farmers most of the times. And so you've got to have somebody in the kitchen who is cleaning those, chopping those, making, tossing salad greens, things like that. So there's job creation that's happening at the school level when you start buying from local farmers. Or you've got to set up some food hubs across the value chain so that the carrots with the tops are cleaned and chopped, the salad greens are chopped, and they get into the school system in a way that schools can use it. And so the employment multiplier effect in Georgia, can anybody take what a guess that could be? Pretty significant. It's 3.35. So for every job that is created in the school system, there's an additional 2.35 jobs created just because of farm to school. In the Minneapolis School District, the employment multiplier effect was 1.96. So again, significant. I think these numbers are significant. I want to share that with you to see what we can do here in North Carolina. Another case study that I want to share with you is from the Northwest in Oregon, where strategically the Oregon farm-to-school folks knew that this was going to work, but they really wanted to be strategic about how they do this. So in 2010, again, they found some philanthropic dollars from a foundation to go into 2 school districts to provide them an additional 7 cents of reimbursement to buy from local farmers. So they didn't have the money through the state. They found a local donor just for 2 school districts, gave them additional 7 cents to buy from local farmers, and studied it because they wanted to use that study for policy gains that they had their eye on eventually. And what they found was that just by these 2 school districts buying from local and regional farmers, there was an economic multiplier effect of 1.86. So 1.48 in Georgia, 1.45 in Minneapolis, 1.86 in Oregon, just by 2 school districts buying from local and regional farmers. The employment multiplier effect was 2.43. So again, significant, very, very significant numbers that I'm sharing with you here. And believe me, the Oregonians were strategic about it, and I say that because they were able to use this study for policy gains to actually establish a policy now, which is one of its kind in the country, where $4.5 million in grants are going from the state to school districts to buy from local and regional farmers from within the state of Oregon. This is the largest amount of state investment that I've seen in terms of farm to school across the country. And it's obviously having great impact on the state of Oregon. So I wanted to share that with you. I'm actually pretty much out of time, but I did want to share with you that these examples, I hope, have spurred some thinking in terms of what we can do in North Carolina. North Carolina has something called the NC 10% campaign that encourages institutions and consumers to buy 10% of their food budget locally. How many of you are aware that we have an NC 10% campaign? A lot of people, see, but still, we didn't question ourselves when we were eating lunch today whether that food was coming from local and regional farmers or not. So as I leave the stage, I know there's a couple of examples that are going to come from North Carolina that are talking about local and regional foods, that are talking about outdoor education and a lot of different other models. Think about what you can do as an individual to facilitate the local and regional food system in North Carolina. What can you do as a parent at a school? Go ask the question whether your school system is buying from local and regional farmers or not. And each one of us can play a role in terms of facilitating the local and regional economy just by thinking about where our food is coming from and teaching our kids to ask the same question as well. Thank you very much for your attention.